Okay, we're going to get started with our last lesson before we jump into our first quiz of this unit. So today we're going to learn how to write proportions and use them in everyday life. This is my favorite lesson because this builds on so much stuff that we're going to be doing for the rest of the year basically. And we use proportions with so many things, it's awesome. Okay, today's date and page number should be written down too. Okay, so here is your warm-up. It says McMillan's restaurant is celebrating its 50th anniversary by offering hamburgers, 3 hamburgers for $2. So Sue makes this quick table for a reference at the drive-up window. You need to complete the table. And then for question 2, the weekend goal is to sell 1,200 hamburgers. How much money will the restaurant receive if they reach that goal? So go ahead and complete the other table as well. Come back when you're done. And here are the answers you should have gotten. So if you follow the patterns with the first hamburger list, it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. So the cost went up by $2 every third hamburger. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15. Now on the bottom, it's the same exact thing except we were making it instead of 3, 300. So you just have to add 2 zeros onto the bottom cost to make 200. And I followed the same pattern. So the question says, how much money would they make if they sold 1,200 hamburgers? Your total for the weekend would be $800. Wowzers, a lot of money for some hamburgers. All right, now that we're all warmed up and used our tables, let's get into proportions. All right, a little space humor here for you. So you've probably heard already that water is called H2O, dihydrogen monoxide. And the scientific formula, as we know, is H2O, which means there's 2 parts hydrogen for 1 part oxygen. That's a ratio. So if you had 1 little molecule of water, it would be a 2 to 1. If you had 2 water molecules, it would be 4 to 2, and so on and so on. You just keep multiplying up. So if you notice here, with the atoms of a water molecule, the ratio is actually equivalent ratios all the way up. 2 over 1, 4 over 2, 6 over 3, and 8 over 4. So really what we're doing is we're showing several different proportions. So a proportion is an equal equation that shows 2 equivalent ratios. And as you can see here, we have 1, 2, 3 equivalent ratios based on our original ratio. So if you have 2 next to each other, those are proportions. So 2 to 1 equaling 4 to 2, it's the same exact value, so they're proportionate. 4 to 2 is equal to 8 to 4, that's proportionate. And 2 to 1 is also equal to 6 to 3, that's also proportionate. So I want you to have this example down that you see at the bottom. I'm really only looking for this stuff to be put into your notes, so you have the definition of proportion. And remember everybody, this is planet Earth, so whatever you do, don't drink the water, said the alien family coming to invade us. That's me. Go ahead and write your notes down and then move on. So here's our first example of looking at a proportion. So here, if you look at the top, if we model it, this is a ratio. Just looking at this part, this is a ratio. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 triangles to 2 circles. Okay? So that is perfectly fine as a ratio, but the next step is if we could separate these into equal groups. So if we were able to separate them in equal groups, the other way we can separate it is 2 triangles to 1 circle, 2 triangles to 1 circle. We're able to make even groups. So by dividing there, we've now looked at 1 ratio, 2 ratios. Now we have what's called a proportion. So 4 to 2 is equal to 2 to 1. These two are equivalent ratios, which equals a proportion. So that's basically what it is. If you can create equivalent ratios, equal parts top, equal parts bottom, you have yourself a proportion. Let's go ahead and move on from here. If you want to copy all this down, you can, but I'm not so worried about this first example. All right, so here's our first practice problem, and I'm going to have you do this one but I'm going to help you a little bit here too, just to make it a little easier. Remember that a proportion is two equal ratios. So I always like writing them as fractions. So we know we're going to be looking at dogs to cats. Let's focus on that too. Dogs first and then cats. So to do our first ratio, I see that we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 dogs. And we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 cats. All you need to do is create another proportion or another equivalent ratio, and you'll have your proportion. So go ahead and do that. You can even come up with couple proportions if you want, but I'm just looking for one. Come back when you're done. All right, so here are two different proportions you could have, and I'm going to help you kind of write these neatly. The first one is that 12 to 9 is equal to 4 to 3, which all I did is I divided by 3. So the correct way to write this answer would be 12 to 9 equals 4 to 3. The other one I did was also based off the 12 to 9, and I multiplied the 12 and the 9 by 2, and I got 24 and 18. So they each stand alone on their own proportion. So those are two different examples that you should have. Hopefully yours are close to mine. If not, we can check them and we can see maybe your math was off a little bit. All right, let's move on. So one of these fancy witchcrafty kind of math things that I'm going to teach you guys today is a thing called cross products. So we've done cross simplifying with figuring out fractions, but this is sort of the same way. So what happens is for cross products, your cross product means cross multiplying, since product means multiply. These are how you can find equivalent ratios. So let's take a look here at these examples I have. I have red going across. So if you looked across with the 2 and the 8, oh, I'm in the wrong spot. We look at 2 and 8. 2 and 8 makes 16. Well, we know that this is equivalent because if we look at 4 to 4, 4 times 4 is 16. So these are the same diagonally. 3 times 15 gives you 45 on the second one here. And 9 times 5 gives us 45. So that's equivalent as well. On the third one here, 9 and 2 make 18, but so does 6 and 3. So that makes that equivalent as well. And on the last one, we have 14 and 1, and 7 and 2, they both make 14. So we can figure out how to find a proportion or a missing part of a proportion, because as long as we know that crossways the proportions are going to be equal, we can find a missing value. Let's get into some practice. So here's the problem we're going to practice on. Let's say we were given 3 to 4 is equal to n to 16. Well, here we know we're missing a value, but we should be able to figure this out because we're looking at cross products. 3 times 16 should equal whatever 4 times n is. That's how it works. So the first thing we do is we cross multiply. So we're going to cross multiply 3 and 16 first, because that's the one that has two numbers. 3 times 16 is 48. So then we write an equal sign. On the other side, we're going to cross multiply 4 times n. Well, since we know when you deal with the variable, you can't actually multiply both together, so we just call it 4n. So now we're looking at a one-step equation, and we've practiced these all year. So what you're looking at is you're trying to figure out what's the inverse operation to get rid of 4n. Well, in this case, we have to divide both sides by 4. And what that will do for us is it will tell us how many times, or if you divide 4 into 40, it will tell us what n is going to equal. So 4 goes into 48 12 times, so n equals 12. So when you're going to check your work, all you have to do is plug and chug. We're going to plug that 12 back into our proportion, and we're going to make sure that 3 to 4 is the same as 12 to 16. And there's several ways we can test this. We can just multiply them across and make sure that they work. Or you can see if your fractions are equivalent, like saying 3 times 4 gives me 12, and what I do to the top, I got to do the bottom. And 4 times 4 gives you 16. So it's a cross multiply, and then you're dealing with a one-step equation that we've been working on for quite a while. Have this down before we go on to some of your own practice problems. All right, and because I'm a nice guy, don't let anyone else know, I'm going to do number 8 with you, and then you're going to do 9, 10, and 11. So again, we need to cross multiply. Now I can do 2 and 24 because I know those will work. So 2 times 24 gives us 48. And on the equal side, on the other side, we have 3 times d. And we know that all we can do is just chunk them together as 3d. Ooh, 3d. Anyways, how do we get rid of the variable? We have to divide in this case, because dividing is the opposite of multiplying. So we divide by 3. Now when we do that, 3 goes into 4 once. We're left with 1, and we bring down the 8. 3 goes into 18 6 times. So D equals 16. That's the correct answer for number 8. And again, we can check this by doing a plug and chug, or that we cross multiply and we should get the same value, or find equivalent ratio. All right, your turn. 9, 10, 11. Show your work. It's going to help you out instead of trying to do it all in your head. And here are your answers for 9, 10, and 11. So I cross multiplied 9, I got 8p, and I got 120. So I divided 120 by 8, and I found that p would be 15. For number 10, I cross multiplied 6 and 7 to get 42, and 14 and x gets 14x. So I divide 14 into 42, which went in evenly 3 times. That's always nice. And for 11, I had 7p, and 55 times 7, that took me, or 77 times 5 took me a little bit, 385. I divided 7 into 38. That went in 5 times. I had a remainder of 3 and brought down the 5. 7 went into 35 again 5 times. So p here equaled 55. So hopefully you got the same answers, and it worked really well for you. We'll be doing a lot of extra practice as we go, so make sure you really get this. The whole second section of our unit is going to basically be using proportions too. And finally, here's a word problem that you can use, or where you're going to use a proportion to be able to figure it out. So let's say the label of a bottle of pet vitamins showed that it recommends that you do 1 teaspoon for every 20 pounds your dog is. Well, if your dog weighs 15 pounds, you got to figure out what the value is of how much medicine you're going to put in. So you set up a proportion, 1 over 20 equals something over 15, and you cross multiply. So 1 times 15 is 15, and 20 times v is 20v. So then you have to divide both sides by 20, and because you can see that you have 15/20ths, you know that you're going to have a number that's less than 1. So really all you have to do is simplify 15/20ths, and you get 3/4. So you can do word problems. You can do the same kind of thing, setting up a proportion. And sometimes you have to, because it doesn't always work out evenly like this one. So here's a problem I want you to look at. It says, according to Ty's study guidelines, how many minutes of science reading should he do if his science class is 90 minutes long? So as you can see here, it tells us in the table, for every 20 minutes, 20 minutes for every 60 minutes of class time. So 20 minutes of studying for every 60 minutes of class time. We need to find out, and I'll even help you out with this. That would be 20 minutes of study time, study, for 60 minutes of class. So we have to set up a proportion. Remember, we're trying to find out how many minutes he's going to have to study if he has a 90-minute class. Go ahead and solve for that x. Come back when you're done. And hopefully you found the same answer I did. He needs to study for 30 minutes. So I set up my equation, helped you out with that, and then I just divided 60 into 1,800. I noticed they both shared a 0, so I crossed it up to make the math a little easier. All right, so go ahead and work on these 2 box of thought problems. The second one, you can use any proportion you make. You just have to be able to give the example and then tell how you know that it's an actual proportion. You have to explain to me how you can check your work. All right, here's our quiz. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 problems. And for number 1, you're going to just create a proportion for the model. It looks like it's 6 pencils to 3 erasers. You got to find equivalent ratio for that one. 2, 3, 4, 5, you're just going to solve for the missing variable. And number 6, you're creating a word problem. That one's going to be a little challenging. I think you'll be able to figure it out though. All right, that's all I have for today. We'll see you next time. I know next thing you have is a quiz. Good luck on that. We'll see you on the other side with some more lessons.